back from commercial break now. We no longer have an error of a running script. What we were trying to do was go and use the search toolbar to find how to make a hillshade of our DEM here. So I just typed in hillshade, selected hillshade, and this thing popped up, or at least it did now. Input raster is the raster that we're going to perform calculations on. So that's going to be the DEM. You can only generate an accurate hillshade from a digital elevation model. If you want to generate a hillshade for a DEM that you don't have added to your map, you can also use this little folder button here. I call that the browse button, and that's going to allow you to navigate to some place in your computer and select some folder and add it that way. It's going to give you a default location to output your raster. I have no idea where this default location is, so I am going to change this so that it saves to my Y drive lab folder so that I actually know what's going on. Again, make sure you use an appropriate naming convention. I'm going to call this HC Hillshade, my name. The default azimuth and altitude is what works best for us in most situations, so I'll keep that. And I'll click OK and wait patiently as Arc performs a series of mathematical calculations to give me a nice pretty looking file. At least I think it will do that. I'm willing to bet nothing is happening right now. Normally I would see, here we go, something's happening. You can see this browse bar at the bottom. There we go, we got a check mark there. And look at that, sure enough, we've got a hillshade. Doesn't that look nice? One way I might want to display this is by turning some transparency to it. You'll notice that I just turned off the Hilton Creek DEM. That's because it is still displaying, right? The layer is on when it is checked, but we can't see it, so it's not very useful for me to have it on when it's underneath something else, like I just did with this unit. And you see when I turned it on, my computer got a little sluggish. So one useful way to sort of use this hillshade is to set it such that the transparency, which you can find in the display tab of properties, is low enough or high enough that you can actually partially see through that hillshade to the units below. And you'll see it's taking some time to display because I'm displaying all these stacked rasters, right? So I need to go ahead and turn that off. Right, and now we'll see that nice color orthoquad with a little bit of sort of depth to it now. So that all looks well and good. I'm happy with that, and I think I'll be able to do some editing on that later. But for now, the next thing that we wanted to do is actually make a topographic profile of Hot Creek. And this can be kind of tricky. So a lot of you were scared when you saw this big white blank screen. When that happens, it's not a bad idea to turn off a layer that it's trying to display and then zoom to one of the layers where you know most of your data is. Whenever I bring up a drop-down window like this, it means that I'm right-clicking on a file. If I left-click, it's just going to highlight the text. I can left-click again to then edit the text. Alright, so editing. If you do not see the editor toolbar in the top, mine's right here, then you can right-click some of this gray space and actually select it here. I'm going to turn it off, and now I'll turn it back on. You'll see that the person whose computer I'm using uses a variety of other toolbars too. I have no idea what a lot of these do, but I'm sure you could learn something about it, maybe with the assistance of this help feature here. Oh, that looks like it's specific to this particular toolbar. Never mind. Alright, so now what I want to do is start editing. The way that the editor works is it can manipulate data that you have that's stored in a single location. So at the top of the Start Editing window, it's going to show us all the files that we can actually edit, right? If we zoom over to our table of contents, we see that there's that hillshade that we created. There's the faults feature we created in our geodatabase. We gave it that nice alias fault so it's easier to work with. There's the offset moraines. We could play around with the Hot Creek file I painlessly digitized and that Hot Creek points file. So So you can choose these individual files, but rarely are we going to be editing just one file at a time. Usually you want to work with groups of files, and that's best done by actually navigating to the source of the particular files that you're working with. So as long as a group of shape files have the same location on your hard drive, either within a geodatabase or within a folder, like for example, the files that we put in this Creek folder in our Y drive, which were the Hilton Creek Hot Creek and Hilton Creek Hot Creek points files, we can go ahead and edit those two files together, and that's exactly what we want to do. If, when you do this, you get an error that says you have a wrong spatial reference frame, go ahead and cancel out of that error, go over to your Layers palette, go down to Properties, and double check that you're in the right coordinate system. For us, that is NAD 1983 UTM Zone 11 North, and then check that the files you're editing have that same coordinate system. You'll find that in the Source tab, and then it'll list it all here. If they are not the same, you're probably going to want to just go ahead and remake the shape files. The source for the layers you can actually change as long as you're not editing. When you start editing, it locks this in. So to make this long profile, what I'm going to want to do is discretize the channel into a bunch of points. That's why I gave myself this point file to work with. So I'm going to select that. The feature that I have selected is the one that the editor knows that I'm actually trying to work on. Selected as in Create Features here. But the thing I want to discretize from is the actual Hot Creek file, right, which is in this Hot Creek shape file here. So I'm going to go to the Select Features tool, and that's going to allow me to click and select this Hot Creek feature while I'm still selected on the Hilton Creek Hot Creek points shape file. When I have that selected and this as my editing feature, I can go up to Editor and construct points. Now what I'm doing is I'm telling ArcGIS to construct points from the thing that I have created, selected, and into the feature that I'm referencing here, right? And we see that in template here. There are 12,630-ish meters of line length, right? This is displaying based on the map units that I'm using, which in UTM would be meters. So I want to construct features so that they're an even distance apart. And I know from previous experience and from the fact that 130 is quite a few points that I want about 100 meters between each feature. And I can start this from the end or the beginning of the line, right? For us, we're going to want to display the long profile so that the left is at the highest elevation and down to the bottom. And we want to do that from the start, right, so that it flows down in this direction. The creek is flowing that way. And I'm going to click OK, and bam, voila, all of a sudden my line got fatter. And that is because if I zoom in here, we will see that there are points every 100 meters apart. And if we go up to the measurement tool here and measure from one of these points to the other, we'll see that it's about 90 meters away. The reason that it's not exactly 90 meters away is because you have to go along the length of this line to get the full 100 meters, right? The shortest distance is not as long as the wiggly distance. Okay, so that's all the editing that I need to do for these two things. So I'm going to go ahead and stop editing. It's always a good idea to save your edits, and why not? Let's save our map again. Zoom out a little bit to get a little better view of the world. Now if we check out the attributes found again by right-clicking that shape file, we'll see that we have about 126 points, right? We had 12,630 meters of river length, and we divided that into 100-meter segments. And there's one segment ID 0 and one segment ID 125, so that's a total of 126 points. Now what we want to do is take the value for the DEM at each one of these points and add it to the attribute table.